All right, welcome to the Pitchbook podcast. We are excited today to bring this special edition of the podcast. Today we have with me, I'm Zach Hewish. I'm currently sit on the City Council of Eagle Mountain City, as well as one of the co-founders of the Pitchbook podcast. And today I'm excited to invite Mayor Jared Gray, Council Member Craig Whiting, and we're also excited to have Colton McEwen, who runs the Eagle Mountain Value newsletter, with us. Just to give a little context of how we got here today, I woke up Tuesday morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, because what else do you do when you're 46? You wake up at 4, you go onto Facebook, and you see, now I get to see who's screaming at me on Facebook. It's kind of, it's a fun experience. And I was, reading through some of the questions that were online around the tax increase. There's a lot of misunderstanding, and I think the city has done an okay job getting infographics out there, but there's clearly a huge gap in what's happening, where's this money going, why is the increase so big. And I just thought that there's got to be a better way for us to communicate this to residents. I personally am a podcaster. I spend a lot of time in the car listening to podcasts, listening to books. And so I just thought, you know what? We'll just do a long form podcast. If I have to do it by myself, I'll do it by myself. I reached out to the group, and there were several people on the council interested. Colton, we had an opportunity, you and I, the mayor and council member Clark, to meet, I think a month ago or 3 weeks ago. And so I wanted to invite council member Whiting for his perspectives. And I wanted to invite the mayor back to talk through some of this. So that's what brought us to today. I'm excited to have Colton with us to bring some independence to the conversation. He's a very analytical thinker. I really respect the work that he's doing. He's really trying to understand all of the nuance and get that out to residents. And so today, I'm not going to be the host. I'm going to let Colton kind of drive the conversation. And we hope this is helpful for all the residents in Eagle Mountain that are kind of working through this problem solving with us. So I think the more we can educate people, help them understand what's happening, we'll have much better conversations, higher quality conversations, and a better outcome for the city. So with that, Colton, I'll turn it over to you to kind of guide us through what you've prepared for us today.
Great. Thanks, Zach. Just first and foremost, thank you for having me here. I'm excited. I've been talking to a lot of residents about this, and there's been a lot of questions that have come up. Of course, just like you, I'm on Facebook, interacting with my neighbors, trying to get to understand their viewpoints, what's going on. And so really, I'm hoping to represent the Eagle Mountain citizen today. And so with that, let's go ahead and jump into what I have prepared here. And just to help set the stage, everyone in this conversation, sitting in our individual rooms here or wherever someone is right now listening to this podcast, we're all dealing with the same thing right now. The cost of everything just keeps going up, and especially since COVID. And that's actually true not just for households, but also for the city. So that's kind of the backdrop here that I want to make sure we have as we move forward. So one of the ways our costs are increasing is through taxes. The primary focus of today's conversation is the proposed property tax increase by Eagle Mountain City. According to the city's published proposed property tax impact schedule, Eagle Mountain City will consider an increase to its property tax rate to generate an additional $6,742,938. That's a 220.88% increase to the city's portion of property taxes. I don't think anyone hears a jump of that size and thinks that's no big deal. And honestly, when you consider Eagle Mountain would go from having the second lowest city tax rate in Utah County, and according to some of the data that I've been looking at in my calculations, move from second lowest to third highest. I think that reaction makes a lot of sense. So the goal of this discussion today is for you three to shed some light on why the city is proposing this increase. I know each of you has spoken publicly about this, whether at the June 16 hearing or in conversations with residents online. So I want to give you the chance to lay that out directly. To begin, let's have you set the stage in 90 seconds or so. Share with the citizens why you support this proposed increase. And let's go ahead and start with you, Craig, and we'll move to Zach and then the mayor. Does that sound fair?
Absolutely. So, when I got elected, just this last election cycle started in January. And so that first month in January opened my eyes a lot about what's going on in the city. When you look at the compensation rate for our employees, they're below average, and not just slightly below average of what they should be paid. It's decently below where they should actually be paid, and that's an unacceptable equation for me. When I looked at the staffing levels as well, in numerous departments, we're massively understaffed. And then obviously, when we look at our infrastructure issues, we have a $230 million issue with our water and sewer treatment plant that we need to get upgraded. We have an expensive city hall we need to build among numerous roads. And so I was looking at financial issue after financial issue after financial issue. And that's before diving into the nuances of where we were at with our tax rates and where we needed to be to start staffing and paying appropriately and having the funds to do so. And so I definitely supported researching thoroughly the need for a tax increase. And I ask citizens this question is like, what do you want the city to be? And the risk we have here in Eagle Mountain City is we are off the I-15 corridor, so it's not as easy to attract some types of businesses and sometimes population as well because of commute issues. And so we don't have the advantage that Lehigh and American Fork and other cities have being really close to I-15. And so we run the risk, if we're not careful, of becoming a city that is a, a second or third or fourth tier city in terms of its reputation and quality because we don't have that natural advantage that just will make us strong anyway because we're geographically positioned really well. We don't have that. And so we have to set ourselves apart and that will often take resource in order to do that. And so there were numerous reasons why I supported evaluating our tax rate and then changing it.
Appreciate that, Craig. Thanks. Zach?
So presently our sheriff's contract, and I'm going to give round numbers, so please don't I don't want to misquote anything, but our sheriff's office contract is about I think it's something like $9 million today, roughly. And our property tax revenue for businesses and residents is about 2.7 million. So when you think about the cornerstone of any city, we always want to make sure that we have adequate safety in place. Over time, our property taxes nominally have not changed. I learned as Craig mentioned in January, that my property tax dollar amount on my home 10 years ago was about $200. Last year, it was $200. That cost for the sheriff that protects my home has dramatically increased from, I think, $110,000 for a car and salary to over $220,000 today. So I have been contributing, it's not a contribution. I've been taxed at a rate of $200. And I think that I probably use quite a bit more than $200 worth of the city's services. So the contemplation was, can we get to a place where property tax secure the sheriff's contract year to year? Does that make sense from a policy standpoint? And I think it does. People want to make sure they call 911, that they're going to have a fast response. We don't want to be relying on sales tax, which can be volatile, from a revenue standpoint to secure our sheriff's office, our staffing. And so this brings some stability to the sheriff's contract. And that was initially one of the reasons why I supported the tax increase. And it's true, it does free up those funds that are currently being directed to the sheriff's office.
Yeah, perfect. I'll jump in here. A couple of things that I like what you guys said, and just to expand on them a little bit. A well-balanced city has multiple different revenue sources and also multiple different expenses. But one of the important things, like Councilmember Hewish was just talking about, is you want your most important needs tied to your most steady or most consistent, constant revenue source, which is property tax. And in 2010, that was the case. Our contract with public safety was about $2 million, and we collected $2 million. The problem is we haven't mirrored that as it's gone up. And I'll get more into that as we go through this discussion of what it costs and why that doesn't make sense, specifically as we talk about growth. I think that's where that comes in. Also, one thing that I wanted to make as a disclaimer for myself, I will use round numbers a lot. If somebody wants to question those numbers to be more exact, I'm happy to get exact. But for math purposes and explanation, it's easier to say 1 million is 10% of 10 million. And that's it's, as an explanation, easier, and we can dive into those. So round numbers will be something that we'll use, but I'll try to stick close to what it is. Craig, you brought up the fact that we're a little below average on our employee pay. What we work to in the city as the executive of the city is to be at 80% of medium. That's not 80% of high, that's 80% of medium, which means we're 20% below average in pay to our employees. There are some that are at 90%. There's some that excel really well that might be over 100%, but our average is closer to 80% of the medium income. So that's a scary proposition when we could lose employees to other cities based on, common term, they're poaching us because they can pay more and we have good people. So if we want to retain those people, we've got to pay more. The other topic that was kind of mentioned just now is that we go from the second lowest to the third highest. I think Colton mentioned that. Something important when people hear that is they might not understand. That's Utah County third highest. As compared to Salt Lake County, that's still much lower than maybe a Utah average. We would be the third highest in Utah County, but barely. The ones right next to us, the ones above us are quite a big jump. The ones right next to us are right in the middle by just a touch, right? Zach, we were talking about that earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody even wiggled, we'd all of a sudden go below average again, right? Or below the medium of Utah County. But as a state as a whole, people in a rural area, Salt Lake County pay a lot more, especially when you've got that county, they do rec centers, and rec as a whole in Salt Lake County. That's a lot more than what we pay here in Utah County. So still taxes are quite low and quite average, I'd say, countywide for where we're going.
Can we bring up also one interesting point too on like staffing levels, Mayor? Because let's compare ourselves with Lehigh for a second. So Lehigh has a population that's about 25% larger. They're hitting right around 100,000. We're right around 80,000. And so you would anticipate that Lehigh's staffing levels would be 25% greater than ours. But what is it? From what I've read and from what I've just talking to people that are sort of in the know, they're somewhere between 100% to 200% more on their staffing levels than we are.
Same with Orem.
Yeah, I was going to say the one that I've studied is Orem, and that's probably the one I've shared with Zach and others. Orem's at 90,000 residents, and they have almost 1,100 employees. Now, to be fair, we got to break that down. 1,100 employees. They also have an in-house, their own police and fire department. We subcontract that, so we're not counting those employees. But we only have, with this increase, around 42 officers. I believe we're at 36 right now. So we'd be at 42-ish officers. In our fire department, we'd have 3 stations that house about 16 officers or paramedics and firefighters. So Orem, you take out their public safety, fire, and that's like 200 people. You take out school crossings, they still have between 500 and 600 employees. We had between 180 and 200. and that does not count crossing guards that we also pay as employees. So again, to your point, they're 200% higher, and at 10% more people or 15% more people.
Right.
It's a great point.
Well, I appreciate you guys, sharing your thoughts and making sure we understand some things that perhaps we are unaware of, because, we're living our day to day just like you guys are. Our jobs just happen to not be at the city, and yours happens to at least share some for the council members. It's not full-time job, but for the mayor it is. But we don't see the day to day of what's happening at the city. So it's one reason why this conversation I think is so important. But just to take a step back here and think through what I've just heard as a citizen of Eagle Mountain, these things may be true that you're describing, and these problems that you're facing as a city because of just the current situation of the city. The fact of the matter is still that you have decided to increase your revenue by taxing the citizens a little bit more, whether it's a little more for some or a lot of it more for others. And so the citizens have a lot of questions surrounding that. And I have several prepared that I'd like to dive into that hopefully will help you share everything you've just shared from a perspective that helps answers these questions. And so just to jump straight into it, the first question that I'd like to talk about actually touches on, what has already been discussed a little bit. So first off, the new revenue that the city will be getting right now, revenue to the city through property taxes is just below $3 million. But with the proposed property tax increase, that will increase the new revenue by about $6.7 million, bringing the total revenue to somewhere around 9.8 million. So 6 new deputies, do they really cost 6.7 or around $6.7 million? If so, why? If not, can you help citizens understand that a little bit and those numbers?
Yeah, I think, am I okay to jump in, Colton, here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. This is a debate that the mayor and I have offline, going back and forth. He calls it, you're coming from the south and I'm coming from the north. So I'll describe it coming from the south, and Mayor, you describe it coming from the north. Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So
the good news is we land in the same place, right?
We land in the same place. That's right. We get to the same destination. So as a citizen, this is a very simple math, and I'm so glad, Colton, that you brought this question up, because residency, there's I think it's 6.7 or 6.9 million increase, and it's not hard to do the math. 6 deputies, I think each deputy is about 220,000 in cost. The sergeants maybe a little bit more than that. And to use a round number, I believe that cost will be about 1.25 million. Craig, you correct me if you recall a different number. I'm just doing this off the top of my head. So that's really soaks up some of that tax increase, which leaves, several $1 million that people in their minds think, well, where's that money going? What are we doing with that money? And in the current proposed interim budget, there's actually quite an expansion toward city staffing. Councilmember Whiting just talked about us being severely understaffed, comparable to other cities. And so there is a contemplation in the current budget, which would increase the city staff had proposed priority 1 and priority 2 level staff. I believe it's about 26 total employees between the general fund and the enterprise fund. There's different revenue streams that come into the city, like your utility bill and non-revenue generating entities. But in total, it would be about 26 total employees. So that would take up some of those funds. There are also several capital projects within the city that are being considered in the current budget. So that's how I think about it. The rest of those funds would be budgeted for staffing, staff payroll increases, and some capital projects. And some of that would go to the reserve fund? Mayor, go ahead. I'll let you come in from the
I
north.
mentioned this a minute ago about the importance of tying your most steady source of income to your most critical need, which is public safety. So the way that I explain this to people is our current public safety contract with our sheriff's department alone is $9.8 million. That should be covered by property tax like it was in 2010. The property tax matched exactly the contract. And this will explain why growth and all those things kind of come into play. Why hasn't that happened? Or why hasn't that supplemented that? Because we get more revenue, and we actually don't. So a little bit of a long story here that I can help people understand is, and first of all, you mentioned that each deputy costs us $220 million. I want to be clear.
20,000.
Or sorry, not a round number. Mistake.
Can I have that job, please?
Yes, 220,000. That's not. There's been some people that have came to council meetings and said, "Man, that's a high-paying officer." That's not their wage. Their wage is closer to 100 and whatever officers make. I'm not going to guess, but that's all in. Our contract includes their vehicles, their insurance, the support staff at the county, whatever that is. That's our entire contract.
Retirement.
Retirement. That includes the entire pay that we pay for that officer, and they come with a vehicle and all their tools, and that's all included in that number. We pay the county that number for everything: supplies, bullets, guns, whatever they bring, that's covered. So I want to make sure that's not their wage. That's the entire cost of that officer, fuel on their day-to-day basis to get to work and whatever. So now let me start back to 2010 and say why this is tied to that contract, and what a lot of people will say things like, I can't just go to my boss and ask for $30 raise a month. And I'm going to ask, well, are you still making the same money you made in 2010? As an excavating owner in a trucking company, I used to, in 2010, I paid my employees probably somewhere between $14 and $18 an hour, right around $16 an hour on average. Today, that same truck driver entry-level position is between 25 and 35, but probably averages around 30. In 2010, you mentioned in your opening, an officer cost us about 109,000. I think you said 110, but round numbers, right? That's today they cost us 220. That's a 50% increase. I can also see that. So I ask anybody that says I don't get to ask my boss for a $30 raise, are you still working for the same money that you were making in 2010? Now keep that in mind as to the cost. Now go to the increase, the $6 million that we're talking about in the middle. What we did is, as that price went up, other services came down, and then add growth into this. If you use the number, like the national average is one officer per 1,000, our number right now is closer to 2,250, one officer per 2,250. The correct number, what I've used as math, and this is based on scientific stuff, not from me, but officer per 1,000 people for Eagle Mountain, I believe it to be about 1,750, one per 1,750. And that's based on amounts of call, response time. As the response time climbs, you probably don't have enough officers, as things like that. The volume of calls increase, you need more officers. So if we had, now I'm going to use the one per 1,000 just for a number. If we had 1,000 residents and one officer, and it cost us $110,000 in 2010, we're charging that tax for that $110,000. And it's tied exactly. That's what that $2 million was. As we became 2,000 residents, now we have two officers, but now we're getting, instead of $110,000 from the first 1,000 people, we're getting $210,000 in our budget, right? Or $220,000, because we just increased we're to 2,000 residents. Now go to 10,000 residents. We need 10 officers. We need to make $1.1 million. That's how you cover that. But now jump forward to 2026 and use that same scenario. We're still charging the resident 110 for that 10,000 residents, 110 or the 1.1 million, but we need 43 officers. That cost us now 220,000 a piece. So if you understand that even the growth doesn't bring you more, it brings you more revenue, but at the 2010 rate. But our officer cost us the 2026 rate. So we've never raised that entire time to equal the amount that the new growth. So I just explained growth. All we did was add more people. We added another person with that growth, each 1,000 people, but we're charging those people the same rate that we were getting at the 2010 rate. So the growth doesn't cover the expense because of the inflation. I hope that made sense. I kind of bounced around a little bit. Did that make sense?
Yeah, and can I add just briefly on this? This is to sum up something quickly to help residents understand this. So, because the public messaging from the city has been that this tax increase is going 100% to public safety, and it's true, but the city could have communicated more clearly how that's happening. So yes, the increase is handling not only the new officers that we're hiring, but then it's shifting dollars that property tax is now going toward an existing contract and the existing officers. It then frees up sales tax, which has been paying for the existing contract, frees up sales tax to go toward other things. So the city's messaging was correct in that this is all going toward public safety. However, there could have probably been more nuance in how the city communicated that. And I think it's really the city needs to take some ownership on how we presented that publicly, and that's why there's been some confusion that we should have said, look, this increase is going toward new hires plus the existing contract in order to free up sales tax dollars to then go toward these other things.
I really appreciate that, that discussion on that because, but it naturally leads to the next question, which I think, Mayor Gray, you set up really well with your comments about talking about growth of the city. Because naturally with that, the next question is, we have grown so much and so have home values. Shouldn't that mean that you get more tax revenue, which should cover that? So why isn't it covering that?
Do I get to start with this one?
Could you guys explain that more?
Do I get to start with this one? Here's the thing. So with new growth, everything you add, just like I mentioned, that for every 1,000 people, we got to add another officer. For every 50 homes, we add another lane mile in asphalt, which means we have to plow that road. So what we're charging today, even with growth, is what it took to maintain that growth in 2010, meaning to plow the roads, to mow the parks, to supply the officers, all those essential needs, including the balance of quality of life, but we're still charging at the 2010 rate. So I shared earlier with the group some graphs to show those the increases and whatnot. Specifically, now I'm going to bounce over. That's the growth part of that. Bounce over to the increased value in a home. I did one from the ranches and one from the city center. This is a city center actual tax bill for the last 10 years. If you look at all the different taxing entities, because people say, well, my taxes have gone up year over year. Well, yes, your total tax bill, but not the amount you pay to the city. So if you look, that second line from the bottom is what Eagle Mountain City charges. Now, the second from the top is the Alpine School District. Alpine School District, if you see, has gone up tremendously, plus $305. The Unified Fire has gone up $167, which we'll get into that. The Eagle Mountain City line that's just been underlined has gone down by 60 cents. Even if, so they paid in 2016 $125. Today they paid $125, minus 60 cents over the 10-year period. Now I want to go to the graph, not the one that shows the actual tax rate for Eagle Mountain City that encapsulates that 60 cents.
You're saying these? Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that's the one. Also to note at the top, as a resident, you pay 55% of the actual assessed value. So if you go over here to that estimated market value, you can put your cursor there just so you can see it, that line there. In 2016, the home value was $211,000, and you paid that $125 to the city. Now, remember, that's the full value, but you're paying on the taxable value. That's the 55%, which is that 116. Now go down, and that value has gone up in 2025 to $426,000. But the rate over here, that 0.000534, has gone down from what it was at 0.01018. So that naturally adjusted down. There was no increase to make that 125.38 stay consistent, even though you're being taxed on that 234. So if you can follow that, that shows that as your value goes up, the rate comes down and the amount paid to the city stays the same. And I've done this exact same thing for a home in the ranches in Cedar Pass Ranch, one of the more expensive homes in the area. But I hope that clarifies, and we can go back to, this same graph. This is a Cedar Pass house. So Eagle Mountain City's portion in 2016 was 313. Today it's 355. The reason is because as you set that rate in the city center house, it went down by 60 cents. In this case, it went up by $42 because the rates not every home increases value the same. So it has to kind of equalize at some point. But the bottom line is it stayed relatively consistent. If you notice, like the Alpine School District has gone up by $1,100. It's not your value of your home that made that go up. It's because those other entities did do a tax increase. Like the county has increased $350 over year, but the city had not. So hopefully that explains the value of the home going up doesn't increase the taxes, that as well as growth. It doesn't increase it enough to cover the cost of the home that's been built.
So let me add to this too. So the 55% tax rate. So there's an exemption for owner occupancy that we receive when we're residents here. And so and we're paying 55% of what the actual rate is. Now, if you look at places like Park City, there are so many second homes up there, investment properties. They're not getting that tax break. And so Park City can tax and receive 100% of it, whereas Eagle Mountain's taxing, and we're only getting 55% of anyway of what the tax rate is. Because Eagle Mountain built its population on owner-occupied homes, which to our credit, that is a great society in which to live. And so that's awesome. But from a city standpoint, there's not much revenue that comes in on residents, properties where it's occupied by the owner. And so the simple math is this: every new household that is formed in Eagle Mountain City costs more for the city to maintain than the revenue brought in from that household. That's the math we're under right now, and I think we've shown that. But simplifying it, if you're paying $125 and you bring in 1,000 of those households, that's 125,000. We should have one sheriff for those 1,000 people according to sort of common standards. It doesn't even that doesn't pay for that contract, let alone everything else the city needs to provide for that. And so that's just a simple way to show you cannot build a society on residential taxation for owner-occupied properties. It just can't work. It never can work. And if you look at the cities that are sort of higher on that tax rate list, it's ones that have the setup I just talked about. They're largely just residential communities with very little commercial, and those residential communities happen to be owner occupied. When you're in that scenario, you're going to have higher taxes. And so our commercial tax base has not matured yet. And we'll get into that later, so I won't dive into those numbers now. But we have been building this city on residential owner occupied housing, and you cannot build a city under that scenario without the tax rate going up in order to maintain the services.
That's super good to know. And even as someone who's been spending all this time trying to figure out how this works on the back end, I couldn't find anything that solidly told me how much it costs for Eagle Mountain City to maintain its growth. And I couldn't really find anything that really showed that. And I even tried to find some sort of calculator that described this is how much it costs to build a home or a neighborhood. This is how much it costs the city to maintain that over time. Does the property taxes of those residential homes cover it? Sounds like you have knowledge of that. I would personally love to see those if there happens to be numbers or things like that. Maybe someone within the city. I think because the citizens, they understand this stuff, at least when it comes to budgeting, and they get and understand that there is a need to increase the city's revenue. Like they understand that piece. But I think it naturally leads to another question that I think that several of folks that I've spoken with have said. And that is, great, we now need to increase taxes, but you're doing it all at once. That's a huge ask. So how come it can't be phased in over a few years instead of landing all at once? Can you describe that? Can you answer that question?
Yeah, I think Craig, did you want to jump in on this one?
Yeah, and frankly, I would have loved to phase it in over a period of years. I would have loved that. First of all, our staffing is so understaffed. That's one reason why we had to jump quickly. But here's the real reason, at least in my mind, and others may share a different opinion, why we had to do it in one big jump as opposed to phasing it in, is the state. So municipalities are creatures of the state. And so we exist at the benevolence of the state. The state can come in and do whatever it wants to change how operations work within a city. And so there was a bill that was presented in this last legislative session, which would have capped a city's ability to increase property taxes more than a certain number. And it was a really small, like 5%. I don't know, I don't remember the exact number, but it was tiny. And so, because we haven't moved since 2010, and because we have built our city largely on owner-occupied residential housing, which values so much less in the tax pool, we are way behind. And so, if we said, okay, had that passed, it would have been a financial death sentence for Eagle Mountain City. We would have been in trouble. And so, fortunately, due to significant great lobbying, which this city is really actively involved, like Mayor Gray pretty much sleeps in Salt Lake City during the legislative session because of how much lobbying he's doing for our city. This is one bill that had to get killed, and we got it killed. And otherwise, it would have been massively problematic. So had that passed, then we're going to be capped at raising 5% per year, something like that.
Yep.
And we are way behind. And we couldn't risk being in that position because you can imagine what would have happened to employee attrition, our parks, our rec program, and infrastructure issues. Like we would have been in a significant problem right there. So that bill can potentially come back in this next legislative session or a future one after that. And we cannot risk putting ourselves in the position of going up. So if we need to go up 220%, and so we only went up 50% this year, and then next year the legislature caps on what we can do, we're permanently, as in permanently, going to be underfunded on tax revenues and in a problematic situation. So we had to we had to catch up. And I wouldn't say this has even fully caught us up, but this has caught us up enough to where now if the state comes in and enacts the legislation I just talked about, we will be okay. It won't be great, but we'll be okay until such time that our commercial revenues mature and can start supplying the other needs that we have in our city.
And if I just add a couple things to what Craig just said, I think that's really good behind the scenes commentary on things that residents probably aren't following at the legislature. In addition to that, the legislature was considering today cities can keep a reserve fund of 35% of their total budget. So for us, that's about $35 million. 35 million is our total budget. 35% of that, we have about $12 million in a rainy day city fund, and it's capped there. We can't save any more than that. We have to start pushing it to capital projects if we have any more in that fund. The legislature, in addition to what Craig just mentioned, was also considering reducing our reserve fund, meaning cities can only keep so much in reserve to 25%, which we again lobbied against through ULCT and other means. So that's just one point. And I don't know why the legislature feels like they need to. I wish they would let cities be a little bit more autonomous in the way they do these things. Another good example, piggybacking onto what the mayor mentioned and Craig talked about with businesses versus residential tax rates. We don't have the ability to have a split tax rate where we say, you know what, we're going to not tax grandma in her house. We're only going to tax commercial. That is not legal for the city of Eagle Mountain to do. So you hear people say, well, why don't they tax the businesses and not tax residents? We can't. We work at the benevolence of what the state allows. So all of these things have to be worked within the constructs of the law and the state. And we are very active, both lobbying, ULCT is an organization that helps cities have a voice within the state legislature. Both Councilmember Wright and I sit on that for this year, so it's really eye-opening. So know that there's some other machinery that we're trying to operate within, to be honest, within the best interests of the residents of Eagle Mountain.
Something you just said, Councilmember Houston, was interesting is we do have to keep the rate the same. The base rate, the tax levy, that number is the same for residential, for commercial. But what you didn't capitalize on is that those businesses do pay 100%, even though what Craig really talked about is the 55% discount that we get, the 55% you pay, 45% discount on residential. Those businesses pay that same levy at 100%. So a little bit of raise, so if you raised one increment, for instance, as a resident, you only pay 55% of the increment, where the business pays 100. So the more you go up, the business is exponentially more money. It is charging the businesses more every single increment that we raise. And one other bill that I wanted to kind of point out, there was a different source of revenue. You mentioned our total budget's like 35 million, but yet the property tax portion was it 2.7, 2.8 million is what we're collecting today.
Yeah.
Because some of those other revenues are things that we talked, one of the big ones is sales tax. Another one's MET. It's called municipal energy tax. The state was playing with taking some of that away from cities and then sharing it in other pools. That would have crippled our budget, because we rely heavily on that income source, and especially in the future with higher energy users, that would have actually taken that money away from us. And we fought hard to keep that money in our budget currently, or that would have fallen back to property taxes. So there are a lot of things that the state was doing last year that really, really scared us on the taxing side and just revenue in general. That one would have been terrible.
So let's actually talk about the numbers again real quick. So I have here average primary residences, and let's say a market value of 488,000. That's the number that the city published. That would if this property tax increase goes through at the 220.88%, that would increase the amount of yearly taxes, the city's portion of the taxes, to be clear. That would raise that amount by $314.03 per year, landing the total at $456.28 in total city tax. And then for the average business, just to kind of accentuate that, the city published also at about $2,554,303, so $2.5 million. That would increase a business's tax at that rate at almost $3,000 a year, bringing their total to about $4,300. So that does accentuate the difference, at least from what I can see. But there's something that's really important to notate here. And I want to transition to this piece. How do you ask for individuals, especially who are on fixed or single incomes? And I'm thinking very particularly of senior citizens on retirement. But obviously this doesn't just apply to senior citizens. How do you expect them to find money that they really don't have at all? And to figure out how to pay those extra taxes. And that's just on top of all the other increases in costs.
Yeah, this is the world we live in today. I mean, in 2022, I remember going to Costco. We always buy a 4-pack of bacon every other paycheck, and that's my barometer of what's going on with inflation and seeing the price of food. Overall inflation was at 9.1%. And even though the rate of change has changed year to year, that price has never come back down. So we had a 9% increase, followed by a 5% increase, and then 3% increase. As somebody who plans for people's retirement, inflation is a reality across food, gas, clothing. Everything increases in price, and it's a challenge. It really is a challenge. I think the question is, should we prioritize, or should we, to Craig's point, do we want to become a city where we fall behind? Our parks are already in pretty rough shape. Um, or do we try to keep up? Do we try to maintain? And, to answer that question on somebody who's in retirement living on a single income, it's a struggle for sure. There's not really a way for us to navigate that and say, well, we're not going to tax anyone over 65. I mean, I wish we had that flexibility to do that. We just don't. It doesn't exist within the law.
So I think something to point out here, Councilmember Hughes, is actually the city does have programs for assistance. The state has assistance program, especially for heat bills and stuff in the winter. And I understand that this is hard for just about everybody. I mean, $30 a month is not something to minimize. I know some people think that's a no problem, where others might say, well, $1 is too much. They're really tight. I would just say to encourage those people, if you're in that situation where you literally can't find that money, ask for the city has programs to help with utility billing. I guarantee you one heat bill is going to be more than if you had assistance on a heat bill, it could be $200 alone. That's the tax increase for the entire year. And there are other programs that are out there that help with, I know the Community Services Board is working on grants for like kids that play soccer and sports, right? They're going to be able to supplement the other expenses that we have with some of the grants and funding programs that are out there that can help those people that literally can't get by day to day. And then those who can afford that $30 a month, even if it means tightening the belt a little bit, it's that's how we help those people that can't make it.
Yeah, and the city has some affordable housing dollars coming in from our commercial investments, our commercial, participants in our community, our commercial businesses, and that those dollars will be increasing even more and more in coming years from these data centers. And this is an application that the city can review on how to use those affordable housing dollars to help people in this specific kind of circumstance, Colton, where we can assist with some things. And there's some parameters on how those dollars can be used. And but we are like we have an amazing mortgage assistance down payment program that comes directly from these affordable housing dollars that we receive from commercial businesses. And we will be able to in future years expand other types of programs to help with people in tight monetary situations. But I'll say a couple things. So let's say that we do this tax increase. And let's say that commercial revenues come in future years that allow us to not have to do other types of tax increases down the road for a long time. Let's say we don't do anything beyond this tax increase. The residents' lives will continue to get more expensive based on everything else going on around us in the environment, whether it's going to be gas going up, energy prices, food prices. As Councilman Hughes stated, like inflation's a thing. It's not going to go away. It will continue happening. And so I would encourage, residents to evaluate their decision making. And that's over a broad spectrum of decision making, not just what you're spending, but also what can you do to change your income levels and make the best decisions you can today to prepare you for future days when things are going to get more expensive, because it will continue to get more expensive. 10 years from now will be more expensive than today. Living, even if the city does nothing to increase your expense as a citizen, other things are going to get more expensive 10 years from now because of inflation. And I will also point out the primary inflationary driver is our federal government overspending, is really what's causing all of this to happen. The big inflation we experienced during COVID was because of government overspending. And so at the federal level is where there's a significant issue, which causing the rest of our lives to be very, very challenging. And I will say this too, like it's, these residents, I've had a couple approach me saying, Craig, this is super tight. This is challenging. What, and they say that as if I have never been there. I will tell you, I have been there, and I'm not going to recount my whole story here. I have been in financial situations probably tighter than any I could probably stack it up against any citizen that's in the city now how tight my financial situation was and how drastic this and how in despair it was for many years. Like I could not. I remember coming out of my home one day and my neighbor across the street coming out of his home and getting in his car and I'm like, "Hey, where are you headed?" And he said, "Oh, I'm going to Cafe Rio." And back then at the time you could actually get a burrito for like $6, like instead of what it is today. And he's like, "Craig, come with me." I could not go. I didn't have the money. I was living on cash advances on credit cards. I borrowed tens of thousands of dollars from family members. I was borrowing equity lines of credit. I was maxed out everywhere. Student loan debt, everything. If I sold everything I had negative $150,000. That's after I sold everything I had, including my home. Okay, so I've been there. I understand what it means when a neighbor brings over a gallon of milk, and I'm super appreciative for that. And I know what it means to skip meals because I've done that in my life because I had no money and I wanted to make sure my kids had food. I understand what that is. And so I know that this is not an easy thing to do. But what I know is this, that you have to evaluate your own personal decisions you're making. And especially hopefully teenagers are going to be watching this. What decisions can you make to put yourself in a financial position where you can afford life and with an understanding that life will become more and more expensive. It's something that we've got to just you've got to watch your income, like decisions on what income you can bring in and how you're spending. And I want that other the last thing I'll just say is this. It is easier now than in the history of ever to earn money. There are more ways and more opportunities and like there's a variety of ways to be creative with your mind on how you can earn money. And so I would encourage people to look like to just sit back and don't just let the world think for you what your job should be. Think broadly about ways you can improve your own income situation as well.
Thanks, Craig. Um, I am currently in a similar situation when it comes to finances, and I know there's so many others just like me out there right now. And it's nice to know that you have that experience, which helps, obviously us understand each other better and try to be better citizens and neighbors. But to be perfectly frank, it doesn't make it any easier.
Right.
And whether or not the city increases taxes, obviously that increase in cost of living is just going to go up no matter what. And so it appears the problem at hand is yes, costs are increasing for me as an individual, but costs are increasing for everyone, everywhere, including cities, including, you know, uh, including cities and the individuals who have to run those cities, which are neighbors, just like you guys,
Yes.
just
Yep.
just normal folks who are all doing the same thing, trying the best they can to survive. Um,
Colton, could I just add? Sorry, finish your thought. I just wanted to.
no, yeah, no, please go ahead.
I think. I hope that we're aware. Eagle Mountain will have 2 Title I elementary schools next year. These are schools that look at the incomes of the families that attend those schools that are near poverty or below the median income level. So we've probably, like most cities, we have some areas where there's high incomes and some areas where maybe there's lower incomes. And I think as a city, this tax increase in budget is not done yet. August 6th, we'll have an opportunity. The residents will have an opportunity to show up. I have really been underwhelmed by how many people have come to any of the city council meetings. I've had 2 phone calls come to me. One was kind of ambivalent, just wanted some clarification on the things we're talking about. The other one was concerned about their own family personal budget. But I really think there's an opportunity here for residents to kind of pipe in and say, hey, um, I'm not supportive of this, or I am supportive of it. I mean, there's people on both sides of it. So I think on August 6th, when we have a public meeting, for those that are listening to this today, please show up. It'll be at 6 o'clock at City Hall, and make your voice heard. And I think that's a great question, Colton. And I'm glad that you're bringing it up.
And I'll be sure to cover that in my newsletter. If you haven't subscribed, it's a plug to mine, eaglemountainvalue.com. You can find my website there. And if you subscribe, you'll get a newsletter every Monday and Thursday where I cover everything that the city's doing, whether that's city council or the planning commission meeting. And I also then talk about all the events that's going on in the neighborhood, and also local businesses that work with me and I want to expose you guys to the great value that's here in Eagle Mountain. So we're approaching our hour point. I actually did not get an eyeball on the time when we started because we didn't start exactly on the hour.
We were about 9:20, 9:25, somewhere in
Okay,
that.
so we're right at our time here. Let's try to wrap this up here. So let's go ahead and go into last minute thoughts just to kind of hear everyone's last minute, hopefully within about 30 to 60 seconds. Go ahead and give your final thoughts to the residents. The key thing here is really just talking to them, as you've already done from your heart, from your soul, and trying to explain, really this increase and what about it is the most important takeaway that they should take from this conversation. Let's go ahead and start end the way we started. Craig, we'll start with you and then go to Zach and then Mayor.
Yeah. So, residents, just to remember, we live here too. I've got 2 daughters that are married that live here in Eagle Mountain as well. My brother and his family live here in Eagle Mountain as well. And I've got numerous friends that live here in Eagle Mountain as well. So this is affecting them and it's affecting me directly also. And what I would say is this, and we didn't touch on this, but the revenue from data centers will start coming in larger quantities. When the data centers, to entice them to come here, there were some tax breaks these data centers had in the initial years. Well, those are starting to go away. There is feasibly a day that comes in the future where we have really healthy revenue from those data centers, which can enable us at that point to then reevaluate our taxation here in the city. There's a potential for the taxation to go down. Now, obviously, no promise about that, but what I will promise is I've got at least 3.5 years more on council, that if the revenues from our commercial sector start coming in such quantities that we are healthy, I will for sure look at this tax increase and see if there's something we can do to decrease that. And that's my pledge to the citizens, because that there's a day coming where that revenue will begin to mature. But just know that we're here with you. I know it's not easy. I'm a fiscal conservative. This is the last thing I want to do is actually come in first year as an elected government official and a fiscal conservative comes in and realizes we got to raise taxes. I would only do it if it were dire and necessary.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback on what Craig said. There is a very focused, concerted effort to build out our commercial base in Eagle Mountain. Some of that groundwork is being laid by the data centers. In the legislature, there was a bill that was trying to take that revenue back to the state and broaden that out. And I thought that just can't happen. Everybody's been promised and talked to about these data centers for years, about all the revenue that would come, and now they're being propositioned with a tax increase. It's like, why are we doing this? I will tell you, there's a very concerted effort to get QTS up and running as quickly as possible to build out our commercial base. We have Smiths and Lowe's, and there are many more that will come, that are coming. We actively have employees, staff that are out beating the bushes, trying to bring more commercial revenue into the city to mitigate, quite honestly, these types of increases. I have 18 months left in my term, and I would love to see that increase. If I'm allowed to stay on council, I would consider reviewing the tax increase. I didn't agree quite with where the budget landed and voted against the interim budget. But I I do think the tax increase is correct directionally. And I hope that residents will come out on August 6th and express where they're at and their thoughts on the increase in budget.
Yeah, perfect. Something that I wanted to point out, or that I would talk about, as you mentioned, you're in favor for the most part of the direction that this is going. Even if you don't agree with the budget and how some of it's being spent, the money's needed. It's just whether and how much we allocate in certain directions, right?
Yes.
For me, and this is something, and I know that Zach and Craig will jump on with this, I would say anything we didn't cover and any questions that you still have, reach out. We want to talk to you. We want to help you and to understand. All our numbers have been published. Messenger on Facebook if you want. Send us messages and we'll answer questions or go deeper into certain topics. I know, Zach, just at the last meeting, you put your phone number out there and you got a couple phone calls. One thing that I will mention as far as that, I've tried to stay neutral in this and not say for or against, but just give the numbers and why and different things. Because as the mayor, I don't vote. So I don't have to say I agree or disagree. I have given information to the council and let them decide where this goes. However, I did say I've been able to answer a lot of questions on Facebook. When this very first came out, I said, I can't say anything about this right now, but I promise you I'm going to save money. I had one resident that said, you need to tighten your belts and you should just look to where you can have cuts. I can promise you I've done that. And one of the areas that I found, in fact, they said, if you find a cut, you should get 10% of it. I'm waiting for my check because I found that we're overpaying on that UFA line that I pointed out earlier. Our contract to UFA and that increase, or UFSA, I should be specific, is way too much. So one of the very first things that I enacted when we started going through these numbers was an opportunity to leave UFSA. That tax bill is going to go away and save the city about $4 million. But it takes a time to cancel that contract. So we have already initiated that process. I wanted to put that out here to let people know that that's what I was talking about. I couldn't say it because I didn't want UFA to know that we were looking into our exit strategy. But that's all been enacted now, and we are leaving UFSA as our fire and protection agency as a taxing entity, and we'll take fire and public safety completely in-house with that, and it will save us almost $4 million a year. That's why this increase is necessary this year. However, next year, there's an opportunity to adjust that back. It won't look like it's going down because next year it will look like we're doing another increase. It's because we have to increase to bring that UFA portion in, but we'll bring it in at a lesser amount. So if you look at back of that one page, when you add those two costs together, it will actually be lower, and that's what will bring us back below the average. So I promise you we're doing everything we can to keep the rates low. This is more of a gap that we can fill to get us back to a position where we can save money. So again, any questions you have, anything that you'd like to get a little deeper in, we will go back to the bottom very soon. We're going to save money. Our belts are tightened, and we're going to do the best we can to provide the services needed at a very reasonable cost. And that's our pledge, that we are doing the best we can, and this is a good deal.
Well, Mayor Gray, Councilmember Hewish, Councilmember Whiting, thank you for taking the time to do this and for being willing to explain your thinking directly to the people you represent. And to everyone listening, thank you for caring enough about your city to sit through this conversation. And we'll see you around.
Thanks, Colton.
Yeah,
Colton,
thank you.
Thank you.